one. There you go. We are starting.
Yeah, numbers are increasing quickly.
Let me give me a little perspective of what I'm coming.
I think we're going to start in about 2 minutes for everyone signing on right now.
It's like countdown, isn't it? Dun, 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 dun.
We have coffee during that? Should I not drink, probably?
Virtual coffee. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, everybody should know we drink coffee as well. So we are already broadcasting. We're just starting in 1 minute.
All the best, Steve.
Pardon, Anand?
I said all the best. We're
Yeah,
waiting
all
for
the
you to
best.
hear.
This should be fun.
For the next 5 minutes, we will hear you patiently.
Well, I'll be shorter than that. I won't bore you. We want to get right to your session.
Over to you, Steve.
You want to get started?
Yep.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to finex 2020. Your hosts, Aro and CFO.University, are delighted you're here with us today. We designed the summit to meet the needs of your hectic schedules. So for the next 3 hours, and for 3 hours tomorrow, you'll be learning from global leaders on topics like managing mayhem in times of uncertainty, the finance business partner role from the perspective of finance leaders, how data analytics is playing a role in the new CFO, how leadership of the future for the finance function is changing. We'll learn about data analytics and how fundamentally modeling is becoming a huge part of the CFO toolkit. We'll learn about how leaders are paving the way to higher performance and financial success. We have an impressive list of delegates attending this summit. So we want to make sure that you use the tools on Whova to your advantage. So please reach out, make new friends, create relationships that you will treasure and benefit from personally and professionally for the rest of your careers. The delegates at this summit are here for one reason. They're here to get better. If you can take your network and expand it with professionals with a deep desire and a deep passion to get better, you're going to have a network of winners. We were thrilled when our panelists and speakers accepted our invitation to join us at the summit. They come with a wide array of professional expertise. They have a mindset for innovation, and actually have showed some incredible goodwill toward the finance community with the way they've supported us. They all have professional excellence that you'll appreciate. So now, let's take a minute and please take advantage of all the resources available to you that finex 2020 has to offer. And with that, let's get started by kicking things off with a little mayhem. Your first session, Managing Mayhem in Times of Uncertainty, starts now.
Thank you, Steve. Hi, everyone, and very warm welcome to the very first session, panel discussion of Managing Mayhem. This is your host and moderator, Zishan Umar. I'm speaking from Dubai. I'm part of Aro Middle East, the organizers and the hosts of wonderful finex 2020 Finance Innovation and Excellence Summit. I'm really excited to be moderating this very first panel in the very first edition of 2020, and the topic of managing mayhem in times of uncertainty. Today we have got very experienced global finance leaders joining us from all across the globe. I have Anand Soni. Anand is a highly experienced group CFO based in Dubai. Anand has been influential in bringing the topic of managing mayhem in times of uncertainty to the limelight. I've also got today Nili Isidis. Nili is joining us from USA. She's research director at the Hackett Group. Welcome, Nili. And Andrew Jenkins. Andrew is an entrepreneur, CEO of PDX Consulting, a leadership and a high performance team development company, and joining us from United Kingdom. So welcome all of you, and hope we bring some valuable insights for the attendees and delegates of this topic. Pandemic has challenged the way businesses were being operated. Business and finance leaders are constantly under pressure to manage the crisis and steer the businesses away from these turbulent times. Top line is affected, business models need realignment, and efficiency programs, especially the cost efficiency programs, are in full swing. So there are different kind of levels and the risk levels which are being addressed, and the finance and the business leadership teams are under spotlight to address these challenges to steer this way. Let me start with Anand. Anand, as a diversified CFO, as a group CFO handling diversified businesses, do you see a difference in how the risks are being assessed in COVID-19 pandemic times than what pre-COVID-19 times? So is there any difference you see in managing the risks? What is your take on that?
Thank you, Jishan, and good to see you, Nili, Andrew, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, my friends. So let me give you a little perspective what I'm going to share today. Well, I have been a CFO, group CFO for over a decade, basically in the Middle East, handling the local and the international businesses for diversified businesses for family-driven groups. So contracting, manufacturing, construction, health sector, refinery, stock market, investment, and give me a business, Jishan, I will handle. And that's how I define myself. Well, I also have been a prolific professional speaker. I love sharing the way I'm doing now. I'm also a strategic writer. I keep writing the matters of professional interest. I was a runners-up at the CFO of the Year Award in 2015. But one thing I want to share with all of you and the delegates, something which is a motivating factor for me, drives me all the time. What is that? I believe I compete with myself every minute, and that's how I learn. And I think that's something which I've found a lot of value as in a professional life. In today's discussion, I'm going to bring my whole experience, expertise, and how I view this mayhem, and what can be the practical, executable solutions. And I hope those should be applicable geographically for any business you're into. So let's start the ride for the next 45 minutes. So here we go. Well, the risk perception today, when I look at, I believe in handling diversified businesses. That's my core expertise. So the risk perception for the diversified businesses is entirely different now than, say, the pre-COVID times. As a business CFO, my core responsibilities haven't changed. Still responsible for managing the growth, still responsible for managing the risks, but big time change, Jishan, has happened in terms of the perspective. What is that big time change? The big time change is, if you're handling diversified businesses, in the earlier times, the risk assessment was probably from the business perspective for an year. You are more looking at the risk from strategic angle, mergers, acquisition. Can I sell this? Can I have a new product line? Now that was a risk perspective. trust me, I haven't heard in my 20 years plus career anyone saying, look, I'm finding a business risky to manage for the next month. And that's a big change, which has happened now. Today, you're talking of managing today, 3 months, 6 months. So very, very, we are literally challenging the going concern of a business. Now, it's not as simple as managing and measuring the going concern. If you have different businesses, you must know which business you are into. So what works for one business, the same going concern won't work for another business. And that's another difference I have found in this COVID times. So essentially 2 major differences. Now the risk assessment is more going concern on today, 3 months, 6 months, survival is an issue. And what works for one business doesn't work for another. And that's where the key punchline, which business you are into. That's what I believe, Jishan, so important.
Yep, thank you. And I mean, since you have spoken about elaborately on the various, and I take this point that there hasn't been a situation except for this one where we're in right now, where you don't know where are you going in 1 month from now. So what exactly are you suggesting here to take this, to take the business out of the mayhem which has been created because of these uncertain times? So what are the steps you would recommend as a group CFO?
Well, the last sentence which I said is very important for me. The business you're into. Now, people are making mistakes in current times by equating one business for another. Now, what works for a trading business with standard products won't work if you are a property developer for a construction business. If you are a subcontractor for a contracting business, it won't work if you're handling a refinery business. And mind you, if you are into a refinery business, you better be clear about the oil prices and what is the subtle difference between trading and processing in a refinery business. Now, let me give you some few examples just to drive you how important is the understanding of the business from the financial and the commercial nuances as finance leaders for us in these pandemic times. Let's say, Jishan, if your business is trading in retail, and typically a retail, a trading, and FMCG business, you would expect showrooms, you would expect distribution centers. You probably will have JVs. Now, what do you do now? You have a cost and a challenge. Now, if you know your business, is it B2B? Is it business to business? Is it business to customers? For example, typically in an interior fit out furniture business, my friend, you need showrooms that time, right? If you have a food business, or if you are into medicines, where it is B to C, business to customer, end customer, you need distribution centers. Probably you may need a JV also. Now, as a CFO, if I cannot appreciate these differences, I may end up, Andrew, Nelly, I may end up doing Excel working, give something to the board, but trust me, it's going to be a number game. I'm not contributing. Let's look at another example. Manufacturing business. We finance leaders always feel shy. Nothing can be done at the cost of goods sold level. We have manufacturing businesses, and I know for certain that if we go to the shop floor, understand the cost optimization, the raw material substitution, and then go back to your P&L account, you can add significant value to bring down the cost in the cost of goods sold level, significant change. And risk assessment and the collections, they go hand in hand. And that has again gone a big time change, Ishan, big time change in the current crazy times, so to say. And how's that? Well, if your business is trading of standard products, you may have various clients, 1,000, 2,000, 8,000 clients. If you are a construction property developer, you have very limited clients. So if you work out the right strategy in a trading business, there are good chances of collecting your money. And mind you, I worked out about 18 action strategies coming out from experience of diversified businesses. And I'm happy to share with you, Jishan, I'm happy to share with the delegates, if they want to understand how to collect money in a trading business, and how to collect money in a construction business. Some of the options are overlapping, some of the options are not overlapping. So the bottom line is very crucial for you to know which business you are into. And if you're having diversified businesses, now is the time for you to get to detail and plan your risks, plan your collections. There are a few of the examples which I'm given, and that's where it is. That's where it is.
Thank you, Anand. I think it stands out the collections definitely, and it stands out from the entire processes. That's a lot of focus is being given as a CFO, as a finance. Yeah, all other points aside. Andrew, I'm just coming now, just changing the angle from a finance, from Anand's perspective of finance to more from a CEO and the business leader. Like CFOs, business leaders are constantly finding ways to steer the businesses out of this crisis. So is this COVID only created mayhem, or there are some other factors beyond this COVID-19? What do you think about that?
Okay, yeah, thanks, Zishan. I'll answer that. Just want to say hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Listen, I think this present coronavirus has obviously gripped us all everywhere in the world with a whole bunch of uncertainty, mayhem, and now, and how this part will play out, folks, will undoubtedly impact the whole future and the very nature and fabric of our work moving forward. But, folks, it's not just this current coronavirus conundrum that's creating all the mayhem. I think there's a much bigger picture at play here, and it has a deeper context for us to understand. Let me kind of explain where I'm coming from on that. So I think generally, listen, I think the zeitgeist of our modern times around the so-called, developed world, if I can use that phrase, is one of, an increasing loss of trust around the globe in our systems, a lack of disposable income that's been seen everywhere, and also, third point, an increased fear in society as a whole. And I think these factors, alone are creating a lot of political instability around the world, with inequality and unemployment rising. And these are important factors. And I think, we can't ignore the climate change is another major factor as well. We can't ignore it. It's just put on hold at the moment because of COVID, but you can bet your bottom dollar we'll be coming back to climate change pretty swiftly. It won't go away. We can't ignore it. I think also, these circumstances, along with technology and the inevitable emergence of artificial intelligence, will really lead to growing trends on an emphasis of remote working and increased attention on rebuilding and reinventing our local communities and our local businesses, to repivoting, remodeling, all of those things. So all of this mayhem, it's not just disrupting your businesses, folks. It's disrupting all of our working lives too, and our lives outside work as well. But the thing is, I think the COVID crisis has probably speeded up what's going on globally, Zishan. I think that's the key thing. And the coronavirus has radically changed the fabric of our modern day, the way our governments think, society and businesses alike. So for example, governments have had to wake up to spending more time and resources preparing for future pandemics and global crises. And that's certainly what we've seen this time, that governments weren't awake enough to deal with this crisis really anywhere in the world, apart from one or two countries like Germany and maybe New Zealand and stuff. Taxation policies will have to pay for recovery everywhere, and that'll likely squeeze consumer pockets, ergo less spending on wants and more spending on needs. And besides, history moves in cycles, people. So the challenge may be sustaining change over the longer term. But, the corona crisis, certainly from my perspective, I believe in working with CEOs around in the Inspired CEOs, which I belong to as a group of as a community of CEOs. I believe the corona crisis has really enabled us to understand the future a little bit better and build back better businesses accordingly, Zishan. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a very very interesting point. That this is a sort of a catalyst event that
Exactly.
has given
Yeah.
given the organizations, businesses, and like us
Yeah.
individuals to be better prepared. That's one of the learning outcomes out of this, I would
I
say,
think so.
mayhem.
Yeah, I think
What are
so.
the other valuable lessons do you think, especially for the CEOs and the SME related CEOs, do you think they should apply post pandemic, which they have learned during this pandemic?
Yeah, good question. So Zishan, folks, I'm a co-founder of a group called the Inspired CEOs. It's a growing community of UK and international SME CEOs. We've got a couple of people online today who are part of that. And we help leaders to think very differently, radically differently, actually, and to take into account diverse perspectives around the globe and become more agile, more adaptable, as this new future, this new normal unfolds. And our primary focus is really shifting mindset, people, and attitude to the changing world of work and the new normal world we're finding ourselves in. And that's all due to COVID, and we believe that this post-pandemic world will provide us with some very real opportunities, folks, to reshape, reimagine, reposition, redefine, our businesses and our workplaces, particularly our workplaces, to build back better businesses. So what I'm seeing, and people, this is backed by a lot of research, and I really encourage you all, if you're not doing this, read deeply, pick up blogs and articles, because there's so much going on right now and the trends are changing continually. So it's important that we pay attention to what's going on around us and to pick up stuff and to read deeply. And, is that the future of the very nature of how we do the stuff of work is a game changer, I believe. And it's changing rapidly, folks. And really, I see the opportunities are in three key areas that I'll talk about in a moment, that leaders will need to really understand, to tackle, to remain relevant and profitable in the next 3 years. So this is looking like a 3-year cycle, potentially, of change that we'll need to see. So firstly, I think there'll be a need to invest much more in upskilling our employees and our staff. Secondly, I think it's allowing employees more, not less freedom. I'll come on to that point later. And also reduced commuting will have a massive impact on well-being. So those are the 3 points that I think will change our workplaces so dramatically. And this is a game changer moment. And by the way, everything I'm going to talk about in the next couple of minutes, I'm publishing as a blog too, that I'll give to Zishan and Steve Rosvold. So you can catch up with the content if you don't quite get all of it right now, because there's a lot of content that I'm going to go through. So I'm going to kick off with really the need for investing in upskilling softer skills. So, I think we've noticed, all of us, you've got to be living under a rock if you've not noticed that digital platforms like Zoom and Teams, for example, have proved highly effective, highly constructive, highly productive for working cultures, for everyone, all of us. Nobody here guessed that this shift to virtual working would be so highly significant. And folks, this will continue to redefine and reshape the way we do the stuff of work. This is just the beginning, and our working cultures as a whole will have to change accordingly. So, co-working, this is an interesting phrase. This whole phrase of co-working, hasn't necessarily formed through deliberate design, people, or by hierarchy. It's actually just naturally involved, and created by itself through people just naturally working together over Zoom and Teams, And I think that's really important. And importantly, it points to getting rid of more traditional micromanagement sort of styles of leadership and managing moving forward. I think that's an important point. And I believe too that businesses will need to refocus less on forming traditional hierarchical management structures of people, and instead move much, much more to self-starting, flatter, less managed structures. Okay. And that will mean more future investment in softer skills for employees, to drive high performance teamwork. And that's an important point. This whole notion of high performance team working is going to become a major factor moving forward. But, since 2008, since the financial crash of 2008 to 12, not to mention the ongoing worldwide disruption from digital everything, you know, that kind of revolution. And also, you know, in the UK, we've just had Brexit, of course. So upskilling got pretty much ignored, certainly in the UK, and certainly, you know, all the, you know, America, I'd class as that. Most of Europe had the same issue. But folks, it's now a priority. We need to upskill our employees. And, you know, the why here, this is important. The why here is this is about a sharper focus on developing high performance teams moving forward to optimize business output. We're not going to be able to do it without high performing teams. Bottom line, folks, here is the notion of employee, of customer, supplier, stroke partner engagement and co-working will completely redefine itself over the next 3 years, I believe. And a key message here is that leaders will have to rethink leadership and management structures. We'll need to rethink training, and we'll need to rethink hiring as well, that whole onboarding process. So training around meaningful relationships, emotional intelligence, empathy with co-workers using virtual meetings, for example, will continue to shift the prevailing mindset around co-working. And this is a profound shift, guys. Moving forwards, you know, leadership and management will need to be much more flexible. It'll be about self-management, leading to flatter organizations, as I've mentioned, and a trend to become much more inclusive. You know, and importantly, with less formal ways of working. I'll come on to that in a moment. And we all need to learn how to continually manage people and projects more effectively in this informal way. You know, that whole informality piece, you know, I don't know whether you've noticed this, but this is really the name of the game, folks, and has become accepted as the kind of new normal behavior for our professional office prevailing cultures post-pandemic. You know, for instance, you know, how many of us have got used to seeing our colleagues in t-shirts, for example, not shirts, you know, and posh, you know, office wear. We're all in t-shirts now, apart from today where we're in shirts, but, you know, as well as we see people's dogs, we see people's cats, we see people's children, other halves. People are just passing the screens, you know, accordingly. And the whole working from home thing has made this informality and the norm. And what's more, we all seem to like it much better, guys and folks and ladies and gentlemen. You know, we do. And it's much better than that sort of stuffy conventions of the pre-COVID office world. I think this will be a game changer, and it will continue, and it's here to stay. For me personally, I think it's actually a good thing, you know. Inevitably, it all means that we're going to be driving towards an increased trend in more transparency in companies too, and that will drive an emphasis on deliberately shaping new office working cultures where everybody matters. So, you know, companies will need to completely reimagine what it means to be highly productive, to be highly profitable, to have diverse workforces and working much closer, having closer links with our partners and suppliers. Training delivery will need re-engineering, you know, to add in blended ways of training staff effectively, both virtually and face-to-face. That's an inevitability. And, you know, folks, new processes for hiring staff. That whole thing about onboarding will have to be reimagined. Smarter onboarding process to snag the right talented people, the right attitudes, all that will need to be established and will become absolutely vital moving forward. Recruiting processes to select, you know, the appropriate person will be much more than competency and skill based or experience based, much more around fit, soft skills, emotional intelligence, teamwork and attitude, not just on skill and competency. So, you know, next up is really business leaders will need to allow employees more, not less freedom. I think this is a really important point moving forwards. So all those high productivity gains we've talked about through virtual meetings, you know, challenges the argument, folks, for employees to work from fixed office locations. This is an important point coming up. Connected to that is the conundrum around, you know, what the workplace will actually look like for permanent office space moving forward in the future for all sectors, but particularly obviously sectors that don't need physical space to show up right now. And that's not including restaurants, workshops and factories. That's excluding those sectors. But furthermore, you know, many cities, major cities will continue to witness dramatic falls in demand for office space. And that means falling rents, but it will also have opportunities for those people in the rent space to create new innovative startups, taking up new opportunities to reinvent, repurpose city office space. You know, San Francisco and London, for example, we're already witnessing these kind of things happening. Yep. So in the next 3 years, you know, I believe that many companies will seek new ways to build some kind of distributed team models. And these will thrive in the new normal in the next 3 years. And besides,
Absolutely.
yeah, I totally, absolutely, Zihan. Besides, many talented people have their eyes open to the real possibility of making lifestyle choices for themselves. People are going to move out of the big cities, folks, I believe, because people are now realizing that it's not being tied to a city location for work, because they can move around and they can get larger properties outside the city centre with more outdoor space, far less reliant than on small pokey flats that cost a fortune in major cities. So I think that will be a major change. And again, this will reinforce the radical rethink about office space. So the current these are still emerging thoughts and no one's really got the answer here, but the current thoughts are centered around transient, informal, smaller opening areas or hubs or spoke type offices that provide all the safety precautions that you need to cope with COVID or any pandemic, necessary for enabling colleagues to meet risk-free and safely for work. But potentially,
Absolutely.
this will mean
Absolutely.
that,
I think the freedom and the office space has been taken over by the Zooms and Teams, and the upskilling, the freedom part. Absolutely. I think.
Right, there'll still be a need for office space, but it's the interesting thing is that there's a possibility of relocating out of expensive real estate areas. I think there's some major shifts going to happen. Is watch this space here, folks. But the trends are likely to increase, as you've just said, Zishan, around flexible working, potentially more contract workers as well, as opposed to full-time workers. That's interesting. It's interesting in the UK, particularly as there's a challenge around government trying to create a mindset of, it's called IR35, which is to favour employed workforces over self-employed contractors. I think that mindset will have to shift.
Absolutely.
And also, business leaders can support and not condemn these shifts will make all the difference. And that those companies that thrive will really embrace this innovative change
Absolutely.
of the workplace.
And I think with this innovative thing, I would like to get Nelly on board on this, specifically in what way finance operations are disrupted during this mayhem from a technology adoption standpoint as well. Would like to hear your thoughts. And for that, I'm sharing your presentation as well. Nelly, just allow me to share that screen for you.
Sure. Thank you. And thanks everyone for joining. I'm really happy to be on the panel with these great panelists. I wanted to say just before I get started, a couple of things kind of in response to what Andrew and Anand have said. And I think what we see as well, this focus on upskilling and talent development, absolutely going to be critical. Technology is not sort of a silver bullet to solve everyone's problems. And I think, yes, there's if we want to call it a silver lining in all this, because the changes were happening before COVID, some of the things that finance was beginning to change, like digital transformation, and this is a catalyst for that. So I totally agree with my colleagues on that. Now, my perspective coming to this, I'm the Senior Research Director for Finance, Financial Operations, and EPM at Hackett. Not sure you're familiar with us, but Hackett, if you know us, you know that Hackett, which is a consulting and advisory firm, really focuses, differentiates itself based on its access to data. We have massive database of finance benchmarks. We run polls all the time. So what I wanted to contribute to this conversation is some recent data we collected that I can share with you. And looking at what we've got, we saw that CFOs got hit especially hard because, excuse me, because the pandemic really had an impact directly on one of their core mandates, which is providing management with data-driven insight, the way management can steer the company in these turbulent times. And that's been a big problem. If you look at the left charts, the degree of disruption, this is based on our COVID-19 study a couple of months ago, looking at what were the biggest disruptor to the day-to-day business of finance. And you would think, at least immediately, would be the transition to remote work, but it's not. I mean, the biggest problem they faced is the ability to keep up with the speed of change and its impact on planning, and increased demand for future-looking information for management. And a lot of companies got kind of caught flat-footed because they had more stale planning processes, periodic planning process. They were not set up for the more continuous and fast-moving real-time forecast that management was looking for and needed very desperately, and still does. So we mentioned before, and I mentioned the speed of business and how we're looking now a month, 3 months out. The same thing with the speed of forecasting. You have to be continuously forecasting to keep up with change. So that was a huge issue. And some of them, a lot of organizations that we saw were really caught in this mindset of historic analysis, kind of variance to budget. And with the budget basically completely obsolete by February, that was not a very productive way to provide information and insight. So but they lacked, a lot of them, the capability, because of technology, to move faster and do predictive analytics and forward-looking analytics. So I think those were kind of the biggest disruptors. And the chart on the right, to Zishan's point, is looking at the impact of this pandemic on the digital transformation of finance. As you can see, and that's much to our delight, this is a picture that shows what the status is of in-flight digital transformation efforts in finance. And the great outcome is that most are proceeding on track. So finance is not seriously slowing down or halting. It's digital projects, and it shows you exactly what the initiatives are to the left of the chart. But even better news, if you look at the blue, some of the initiatives are actually being accelerated. And that means that kind of speaks to the whole catalyst notion of the need to change fast and to make quick impact. And it's not surprising that there is an adoption of more data-related technologies, because without that foundation, you can't really look forward or look anywhere, because you need to have that access to verifiable data. And the other thing that's moving forward quickly is the implementation of smart automation technologies. By this, we mean, for example, RPA, advanced analytics, AR-enabled analytics, cognitive computing, these more digital technologies that are more recent. And the reason we see that happening is because they are, one, relatively cheaper, at least on an OpEx perspective. And they're also more quick to implement. The time to benefit is faster. And right now, that's a necessity. You need to make that impact right away. So we see a lot of transformation efforts proceeding forward. Great interest in we have a EPM technology practice, great interest in implementation of new enterprise performance management systems. Even though we see that kind of at 57%, that's growing rapidly, especially as you move to the cloud. And one of the issues I think everybody mentioned along the way is related to the next slide data point that I wanted to share with you. And that's about the impact of technology on costs. John, if you can move to the next slide. So this is based on analysis we did with benchmarking data we have. We have over 1,000 benchmarks for finance and other SG&A functions. And by looking at current typical company, which is what we call peer, what we define as world-class, which is a selection of companies that are pretty much the top percentile of performance across effectiveness and efficiency metrics. They have to come up to certain levels of performance before they can pass into that world-class category. Looking at the difference between them and then optimizing the finance technology infrastructure even more. And by this, we mean completely system consolidation, decommissioning old systems, moving to the cloud, adopting RPA, going sort of full out digital. you can see the savings, for example, in the headcount of 58% from typical to the projected world-class. And even if you just move to world-class as a typical company, you can reduce that FTE count by 45%. And I'll get back to that because that sounds really scary, but it's not actually as scary as it sounds. And the cost goes down significantly as well between peer and world-class and peer and projected world-class. So what this is telling us is that going forward over the next 1 to 3 years, because in some cases it's a pretty rapid transition, finance is going to become a lot more efficient. And that is something that we see intensified pressure on cost reduction at the enterprise level, but also at the finance function levels. So I'll kind of leave it with that to see if there's any more, if you want me to dig deeper into any of these topics.
Yeah, thanks, Lily. I think just a follow-up question specifically around, as you said, it's more critical to digitize finance operations. So what do you think, especially I take the point of the EPM solutions, has been very close to my heart, the corporate performance management or the enterprise performance management systems. So what are the critical steps that finance needs to take to realize this digital vision of reaching the echelons of the industry in that sense?
That's a very important question because that goes to the core of what finance is doing and is going to be doing more and more going forward, and a lot less in ways of manual tasks that would be automated much more easily. So from a planning standpoint, using an EPM solution that's cloud-based, one of the things that makes it so beneficial right now is a combination of remote work and access to single source of data. So that kind of helps with the workforce aspect of it, to Andrew's point, as well as the capability to do predictive analytics, more sophisticated analytics in a lot of the stuff that just comes right off the box or as a module in your ERP program. So it's possible to move forward on that analytics curve. The important thing is two things. Well, one, to remember that the transformation into that digital world class that we're talking about is not just about technology. It's about talent upskilling. It's about process redesign. It's about governance structures. So there's a whole slew of things, a comprehensive list of elements that we define in our service delivery model that have to be taken into account. There isn't just one thing you can do. So from an EPM perspective, that means upskilling or reskilling staff to focus more on the higher end of analytics instead of very kind of basically looking at variance analysis.
Absolutely.
So I think that's one of the biggest impacts.
So we're just 9 minutes away, panelists, and from calling off the session. I just want to do a very quick, not rapid fire, but quick questions, follow-up questions from the discussion. And we'll also take up some of the delegate questions which are pouring in huge numbers. So just starting with you, Anand, with respect to the board management, and I mean, all the initiatives that you take as part of the COVID-19, managing the mayhem, what kind of buy-in or you can say approvals that you need from the board management, and how are they, what are the different steps you recommend to convince the board to take the right steps to steer the organization out of these turbulent times? So what is your take on that?
Thank you, Dishan, for asking this, because we can keep debating for another 10 hours as a panel discussion, but then the bottom line is get the job done, get the solutions in place. And that's where, as a business CFO, you need to get the buy-in from the ownership, your board. Now it's a tricky time. It's a challenging job. Now there are 3 steps which I suggest. First, in your pandemic times, be logical, do your homework well, analyze well, and with your diversified understanding of the business, go back to the board with your solutions. However, keep in mind, if you have to change it. There's no ego space here. You're fighting against a survivor. So if you have to change it. Be a good listener. But the most important part, the change which I'm doing now in the current pandemic times is make the ownership aware of the worst case scenario. Jishan, paranoid succeed. This is the time. Paranoids do succeed. So you got to tell your ownership what is the worst case, and then give them solutions. No point of giving the worst case, even if the solutions are midway solutions, half-baked solutions, imperfect solution, so be it, but give them a solution. And the very important part is you cannot manage your board and your ownership well if you don't know how to manage your external stakeholders. Jishan, you are an external stakeholder for me too. Whether you are a banker, whether you are a lawyer, whether you are a consultant, I need to engage myself with each and one of the external stakeholder. And once you go back to your ownership, when you go back to your board and show them the efforts which you have made with external stakeholders like banks, we all are trying to defer the bank liabilities. Now, unless you understand a perspective of a banker, from where is he coming? Are you willing to take a back seat and negotiate a deal with him? If yes, and go to your ownership, show the efforts you have made, trust me, you have won the battle. And that's the key point. This is a significant difference as a solution which I'm giving to the team, I'm giving to everyone, and this is a change. You need to know in whichever part of the world you are in, whichever business you are handling, how do you get your solutions executed with the board and the ownership? And that's the key point.
Perfect. Thank you. I think that's a very, just taking the shift. I mean, what Anand has presented as a finance, and you being on the other side of the table as a business leadership team and the CEOs. What are the business opportunities that you see in the near future? And we've talked about a lot on enhancing and upskilling the software skills. And I would say the technology has fast tracked. Because of COVID. I mean, the technology adoption has fast tracked. But beyond those, what are the quick? What is your quick take on the business opportunities that you see that will help us to recover following the COVID-19?
Okay. Great question. Thanks, Zishan. Yeah, I think these may be around businesses that can certainly pivot to focus on their people, making a better world, a better place, as I've said before. But the climate change agenda hasn't gone away, folks, and renewable energy, sustainability. I think these will be major areas for opportunity. So government initiatives may very well re-stimulate investment here, people, in all sorts of opportunities. So watch out for this emerging trend. So for example, just a few days ago, France just announced a €100 billion stimulus package, which includes incentives for green related businesses and transport. Interestingly, investment bankers like Bank, Lombard, Odia and Co, they predict that there will be an ongoing need for growing connectivity and digitization. So that sector, those sectors will continue to grow. And other innovation will come about through a refocused in green enabled technologies and advances in renewables, robotics, battery technology, which are all driving cheaper, cleaner energy use. So I think the specific sectors here, if you like, are, I believe there'll be a continued investment in renewable power systems. I think robotics, automation, and AI development will continue to flourish. I think the construction sector investment boost for green buildings and green infrastructure will be an interesting thing to watch. I think support for the automobile industry will continue, but only around pursuit of clean air vehicles, so electric vehicles, hydrogen vehicles, those kind of things. Absolutely. I think government backing to businesses to support climate initiatives and commitments will be massive. I think there'll be targeted help for innovative low carbon activities. I think that's still on the agenda, folks. And I think continued help to advance away from fossil fuels. I know there's some countries that are more hooked on fossil fuels than others, but I think globally, there'll be a move away from fossil fuels and encouragement to do that. And there'll be ongoing carbon pricing tariff regulation, I think, across the globe.
We're just 3 minutes short of our time. I'm sure the delegates will be able to take the full advantage of your points. I just would like to just wrap up with the last question from Nelly. Nelly, what's your take? What is your biggest? What do you see the biggest impact, long term, medium term, on the finance function, and I am putting the technology in the center of this question.
Yeah, and you know, if we think about it, we're 6 months into this, just going to be, we don't know where things are headed. I think in our study, we found that the biggest impact, according to CFOs, is a permanent change in the finance operating model with a transition away. So I showed you the FTE reduction. That doesn't mean everybody's going to be laid off. It means that there's going to be a rejiggering of where activities are happening. There'll be more activities happening in centers of excellence, global business services organizations, in what we consider to be an evolution of enterprise competency centers. So for example, analytics may be an enterprise rather than just a finance solution, but we'll see finance people transitioning into that role. So I think that the sort of the thing to keep in mind in all this mayhem and terrible news we're getting is that finance may well emerge from this as a stronger, more agile, more effective function.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you everyone for attending this session. I hope we were able to give you very valuable insights into this topic, managing mayhem in the times of uncertainty. The next session starts in about 5 minutes from now. You can go out of this session, leave the session, go to the agenda page, click on the next session, and see you there in 5 minutes, where we'll be talking about the next topic. Don't forget to you go to the meetup and the virtual room at 5:35 GST, which is equivalent to your time zone, which is GMT +4. This is GMT +4 time. Take the benefit of the networking with your peer speakers and all of us. See you in the next session. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Zishan. Thank you, Neil. Nelly. Thank you,
See you
Andrew.
all. Have a
And thank
great
you
rest
all.
of the day. Thank you very much. Thanks for
Thank you.
inviting me, Zishan.
Take care.
Thank you.